Right now, a container is sitting at the port of Los Angeles. Before that, it was on a ship that crossed the Pacific from Shanghai. Before that, on a train from a factory in Chengdu. Before that, in a truck that carried it from the factory floor to the rail yard. Every crane along that entire route was calibrated to the same dimensions. Every ship's cargo hold was divided into the same grid. Every truck chassis was the same width. Every rail car the same length. The whole system, the entire global supply chain that puts cheap goods in American homes, works because one stubborn truck driver from North Carolina refused to accept that loading cargo had to be done the hard way. Before the box, before shipping containers, international cargo was a logistical nightmare. Everything arrived at American ports packed in crates, barrels, bales, and bags of every conceivable size. Longshoremen, dock workers, unloaded ships piece by hand. Every item had to be inventoried, moved to a warehouse, stored, retrieved, redocumented, then loaded onto the next ship or truck. A vessel might sit in port for a week during this process. The cost of just handling cargo at the docks, not shipping it, just moving it around the port, accounted for between 60–70% of the total cost of ocean freight. That means when you shipped something across the world, more than half the cost happened while the cargo wasn't moving at all. Ports like New York's Hudson River docks were also notoriously corrupt. Theft from loose cargo was so pervasive it was effectively priced into shipping estimates. Insurance premiums reflected it. The mob's grip on American East Coast ports in the post-war era was largely built on this system. Every piece of cargo that passed through those docks was a potential target, and most of the cargo passed through many hands. Malcom McLean's idea, the man who changed everything, was not a shipping executive. He was a trucker from Maxton, North Carolina, named Malcom McLean. In 1937, McLean was waiting at the docks in Hoboken, New Jersey, while longshoremen unloaded his truck cargo piece by piece onto a ship. He watched for hours, and he had a thought that seems obvious in retrospect, but that nobody had acted on. What if instead of unloading the cargo from the truck, you just put the whole truck on the ship? He didn't act on it for nearly 20 years. He built a trucking empire first. McLean's trucking grew to be one of the largest in the country. Then in 1955, he sold it and bought a small shipping company specifically to try his idea. The concept had evolved from putting whole trucks on ships, impractical, too much dead weight from the wheels and frame, to using standardized metal boxes that could transfer between trucks, ships, and trains without ever being opened. Sealed at origin, opened at destination, no dock workers touching the content. On April 26, 1956, McLean loaded 58 modified aluminum truck trailer containers onto a converted tanker called the Ideal X and shipped them from Newark to Houston. Cost of loading 16 cents per ton. Traditional method, 583 cents per ton. A 97% reduction in loading costs. The fight to make it standard McLean's container worked. The problem was it almost didn't become universal. By the early 1960s, multiple competing container systems existed. Sealand McLean's company had one size. Matson Navigation, serving Hawaii and the Pacific, used different dimensions. Various rail operators had their own specs. European operators were developing yet another system. Without a universal standard, the efficiency gains were limited to single-operator networks. A Sealand box couldn't transfer to a Matson ship. A European rail container couldn't go on an American truck chassis. Every handoff between operators required reloading cargo, which defeated the whole purpose. The International Organization for Standardization worked through the 1960s to produce a standard. The process was political and contentious. McLean had obvious financial interest in his own dimensions being chosen, which complicated negotiations. The International Longshoremen's Association, whose members saw the writing on the wall about their jobs, fought it every step of the way. In 1968, ISO published the standard. Containers would be 8 feet wide, either 8 or 8.5 feet tall, and either 20 or 40 feet long. The 20-foot length gave us the TEU, 20-foot equivalent unit, still the basic unit of container shipping capacity today. McLean's dimensions were close enough to the standard that Sealand needed minimal modification. He had essentially won the argument. What it did to American and global trade, the numbers are staggering. Between 1960 and 1990, the cost of shipping a ton of goods internationally fell by more than 60% in real terms. Not because ships got faster, not because fuel got cheaper, almost entirely because time in port collapsed from days to hours. The Port of Los Angeles today moves about 10 million TEUs per year. A container ship calling at LA can be fully unloaded and reloaded in 24 hours using automated cranes. The same process in the pre-container era would have taken weeks with hundreds of dock workers. The cheap consumer goods Americans buy, electronics, clothing, furniture, are cheap largely because McLean solved the loading problem. The cost of physically moving a refrigerator from a factory in South Korea to a store in Ohio is now so small it barely factors into the retail price. Global trade as it exists, the interconnected supply chain that means your iPhone was assembled in China from components made in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Germany, is built on the Universal Container Standard. Malcom McLean's argument with himself in a New Jersey parking lot in 1937 created the infrastructure of modern globalization. Malcom McLean died in 2001. He's almost entirely unknown to most Americans. No major monuments, no national holidays. He doesn't come up in high school history class. But the supply chain that stocks American stores, fills American warehouses, and delivers to American doorsteps, that traces directly back to one truck driver who sat in a New Jersey port and decided the way things were done was stupid and that he was going to fix it. He did, and it changed everything. Next time an Amazon package shows up at your door, somewhere in its journey it probably sat in a standardized 20-foot steel box. Malcom McLean is the reason that box exists.